Hello, and welcome to Lockdown Not So Roundtable. I'm smiling.
If you're stir crazy, we got your insert needs that you guys, maybe want to watch.
We're disappointed. The last episode was awesome, and you guys didn't watch it.
Wow.
We risk life and limb for you guys. Just kidding. Welcome to the... All right.
I mean, our virus dies with UV rays, so
Right.
we're good.
Welcome to the Not So Roundtable. George and I, once again, are more than 6 feet apart outside the Evike.com facility so that we can bring Not So Roundtable questions to you guys. As we discussed in our last insert, episode 148, which if you haven't watched, please go do so, we're doing dueling helmets today, kind of like dueling banjos, but, two helms of reasoning and lots of questions. Well,
Real ones.
real questions. And by lots, I mean 4 each, probably.
Oh, no, I did like 2 dozen.
I have 4. I have 4 questions.
Okay, well, I guess we're getting four questions
You're getting
from
4
Matt.
questions from me, and that's it. You want to start us off, George?
Yeah, sure. Oh. All right, this is completely random. I took some episodes from some old episodes. This episode I marked it like last week is from episode 5.
Episode
from
5?
Gun Does. Yeah, episode 5. That is 6 years ago.
Oh my God.
Evike, hey Evike, and special guests that we don't have.
We are special guests today.
What are the best attachments for airsoft rifles? Would you rather have internal or external upgrades? When I chose this question, I realized we really haven't discussed this.
Wait, what was the first part of the question?
The first part of the question is, what are the best attachments for airsoft? So I'll be a little bit of the narrator here.
Okay.
What is the most important attachment for an airsoft gun to have? And what would you prefer, internal or external upgrades?
Considering where we play most often, let me rephrase. Considering where I play most often and where I prefer to play, I find the use of a flashlight to be very useful for my style of play.
Yes.
So indoor, closer quarters. I don't really prefer shooting at outdoor dusty fields if I have a choice. So for me, the most important attachment would be a flashlight or maybe a tracer. Does that count as an attachment?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I'd say that for indoors, I definitely agree with that. Especially dark indoor locations.
Yeah.
Like if you played, I haven't played Battle Lab personally, except for the night with the gunpowder stuff.
Yeah.
But I do know it's a darker field,
Yeah.
so I would just assume that without a flashlight, you'd have a very difficult time to be able to, shoot people effectively. And that actually, I would tilt that in that favor versus a red dot, just because, even when a lot of airsofters, when they put a red dot on their gun, they don't use the red dot
That's
anyway. True. Like half the time, they're not even battered. They're not even on.
That's true. That's
so
most of the time mine are on.
It's mostly a looks kind of thing for some people. And that's the thing is it's because you could see airsoft BBs in motion. It's
true.
People. I remember people back in the day used to criticize people for not using their sights or whatever. It's just you have to understand is you can't really see a bullet when you shoot a real gun. So you have to use the sights to know where it's going.
That's true.
With airsoft, you know where the BB's going because you could actually see your eye.
Body sight it. Yeah.
Your eye naturally is going to focus on the BB and not focus on the sight. It's just natural.
Yeah.
It's instinct. It's for example, if you're throwing a baseball, you're focusing on the ball to catch it.
Yeah.
You're not focusing on the pitcher of when he threw the ball and hope that it lands in your glove.
That's true.
So it's just natural for the human eye to want to do that.
I will say though, if I've learned anything during the process of our newer review style, the reviews that I take the time to actually zero the red dot, put a red dot on, 1. 2, zero the red dot, allows me to A, look a lot more accurate than I am in real life. And B, I notice that I don't have to think about being on target. I see the red dot and I'm there. And so I don't waste that first shot trying to see the BB. So I would say as a good option number 2, or once you've got a flashlight, I think getting a red dot, but also not just getting a red dot, actually zeroing it to where you're gonna be aiming, I think would be a decent
I think indoors a red dot is much more advantageous because it's so quick. You know, it's basically, it is a way for you to get on target really quickly versus like outdoors. I kind of see like, because the BB's so slow that maybe a red dot isn't as useful for you. So I guess it really, like you said, it depends on where you're playing.
Yeah.
As for the debate of internal versus external upgrades, I'm gonna have, my answer would actually be, 10 years ago, I would say internal upgrades all the way. Now I'd say external upgrades all the way, because you could buy a stock gun now. Certain brands are just so good out of the box. There's just no need to even do anything. You know, like barrels are so much better now. You know, stock barrels, that is.
Yeah.
Gearboxes are so much better now that you just really don't have to do that many upgrades.
That's true.
Except for maybe a battery, you know, having a good battery is probably the most important thing.
No, I completely agree with that. I think, well, so I was kind of I've always kind of done externals first, because for me, Airsoft is all about the look, right? So then I wanted it to look super cool, but then I'd like finish the externals and be disappointed with that the performance didn't really match how it looked. So I'd go immediately into internal upgrades.
That was basically my classic Army M14.
And I've never been able to just like leave it well enough alone.
Yeah.
But I think you're absolutely right. These days, you could buy something that performs great directly from a retailer and just do external upgrades and almost not worry about the internals at all.
And external upgrades are also nowadays so much cheaper too. Like you can get good flashlights for cheap. You can get good red dots for cheap. You can just do a lot of things that are, and then you don't have to upgrade rails as much because most guns come with a good M-lock rail these days. So it's just,
or even, dude, I mean, or even a pick rail.
Or even
like,
a Picatinny or a key mod.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
All right, your turn.
All right.
One of your 4 questions.
Yeah. Let me get through this deep helm of reasoning to get these questions. Here we go. First question. Thank you, Dodge. This one comes from episode 129. This one's from Joshua Fink. And he asks, Dear Insert, how do you know if your gun is lipo ready? And if they aren't, what's the process for making them lipo ready? And I thought this was an interesting question.
That's a good question.
Simply because the catch-all term of lipo ready was started a few years ago.
Yeah.
And it really has no bearing on any part of the internals.
Correct. My experience with lipos, and I think probably the term lipo ready, here's my theory. This is not backed by anything. Maybe Ryan could chime in if I'm wrong. But I feel like when lipos first came out, all it was 11-1s. And so an 11-1 battery is very powerful. It's very powerful battery. And, it's not on par with really, even an 11 point, even a 12 volt, I think it's 12, right? Batteries that were NiCad.
9.6 or
not
12.8?
9.6, the 12.
Yeah. 12.8,
12.8 or whatever.
12.8?
Was it 9.6?
It
went 9.6, 10.8, and then 12 volt?
Okay.
Well, anyway, it was basically like the most powerful NiCad batteries you could get.
Yeah.
Those are pretty fast too. Those are definitely faster than a 7.4 volt is now for lipo.
Yeah.
The thing is just like, all it is just flooding electricity through your motor and everything like that. So can your motor handle that amount of power? Most can, even cheaper guns back in the day could. So then the next thing is like, well, it's basically the more stress you put on something, the faster it's going to degrade. It's just, that's with cars, that's with everything for the most part.
Yeah.
If you put more pressure, like it's hot right now, right? If you put more pressure on your AC unit, you're going to run out of coolant refrigerant faster. You're going to, it's your power bill is going to be, you're just going to put more stress on it. So I would say that all guns pretty much for the most part are lipo ready. However, if it's a cheaper gun, I'd probably only use a 7.4 in it.
Right.
Just because it's basically equivalent to a 9.6 almost. And you'll probably be okay. The things that'll wear out fastest, in my experience with stock guns, is actually the bushing or bearings.
Right.
Is what has broken on me.
Right.
And this is coming from like old SEMA AKs. That would be the first thing that usually would break. Would be the bearings.
Yeah. I mean, kind of to that point as well. The oftentimes the restriction in the internals for electrical flow is your wiring, your trigger contacts, and your motor, like you said. And when you get a larger jump in amperage from a lithium polymer battery, that'll burn out your trigger contacts quicker, that'll heat up your wiring, that'll cause issues with desoldering. And so a lot of the failures that we've seen through the years have just been undersized wiring or kind of cheaper wirings that don't...
What were they, do you remember what AWG they were using back? I mean, I'm pretty sure it really hasn't changed.
I mean, older stuff was like 18.
18?
Yeah. And for a
Yeah.
for a lipo compatible wiring
not good
system.
18 either. It was like not good 18.
Yeah.
No, it was like 18 to 22, and it was pretty thin, pretty low strand count.
And mostly nowadays they're using 16.
16 or even 12.
12 is probably like overkill, but like, I mean, if you understand anything about electricity, is the size of your gauge wire is basically like the flow valve on a faucet. You know,
Right.
However big it is determines how much flow of electricity
Right.
goes through. So if you ever had a gun that, for example, let's say you blew out your fuse, it's because you probably have a low amperage fuse, and
Exactly.
it's passing too much
Right.
electricity through the fuse. That's the whole point of it.
Right.
It's the whole point of a breaker
And
at home.
and the fuse is doing what it's intended to do.
Yeah.
If you're blowing fuses, you need to be looking at another problem, not going up in fuse size.
How many amps does a 7.4 draw? Do you know off the top of your head?
It's a calculation based on the voltage and the milliamperage.
So let's say a 1,000 milliamp battery at a 7.4 volt. That is how many amps?
-1, that's frequent maths.
In terms of amperage, the wiring could handle it, most likely.
Yeah.
The trigger contacts, so that's why people, when they use semi-auto, they'd have issues a lot. Trigger contacts burning out because it's just, what is what is that doing? Is it just constantly going like this, opening, closing the
Exactly.
circuit?
And you're getting arcing.
Yeah, and
because
that's
you're
why
high
your
voltage.
motor gets
Right.
super hot. That's why your battery cable gets super hot, because you're just opening and closing the circuit.
Right. And that's also why we push the Airsoft T-plug and Deans these days, is because that's a connector that's rated to handle 60 amps. And there are that I can think of, there are no factory AEGs that draw 60 amps.
I don't think so.
Your average battery, if you're wondering what kind of amperage your battery can deliver, as we were just talking about, the amperage it can deliver is your milliamp hours times your discharge rate. So if you have a 3,000 milliamp battery, a 10 C discharge, that's 30 amps it can deliver. So as long as your gun is drawing under 30 amps, you won't puff your batteries. See how that works? Now you're gonna ask how you can calculate how much your AEG draws in terms of amps. I have no idea.
Well, I mean,
You need like a multimeter, and then you have to
Yeah.
have it in line between your battery, and it's complex.
Some of your MOSFETs will have
Yeah.
computerized like draw, like
Yeah, if you have like a Titan with their program, you can see how much
Titan
it
or the
draws.
Spectre will give you real time like amperage draws.
interesting. Yeah, I forgot
If you want
about
to
that.
guarantee that your gun is LiPo ready, get yourself a MOSFET or a trigger board MOSFET. It helps to regulate the voltage and the amperage going between the battery and the electronic system. They're designed to work with higher voltage setups like lithium polymer, and it's going to be safer for your product overall. And there are a lot of brands that include products from Gate and
And a lot of stock guns come now with at least a bare bones MOSFET to help assist with this. And also, like, even before that, the main key thing you just have to pay attention to how you're using your gun.
Right.
If you're going to be shooting semi a lot, it's going to be really difficult for you to use a lipo on some stock guns, especially some motors, because they'll just get super hot.
higher amp draw.
Yeah.
If you look at your draw curve during semi-auto, you get a really big spike, and then as you continue firing, it takes a lot of energy to get the motor spinning. But if you stayed on full auto, that curve comes back down and levels out at a lower amperage draw. So if you're only doing semi, you're asking the motor to hit its highest current draw, trying to spin up every single time, and then stop, and then spin up, and then stop.
Most guns these days can handle it.
Yeah.
But that's just, the term lipo ready really was a thing to just be like, basically, in my opinion, it was basically our gearbox can handle a 11.1 lipo and not break.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what lipo ready meant.
Yeah.
Everything's technically can run a lipo. It's just a question of when it breaks.
Next question.
That was a
That's
really
a
good
great
one.
question.
I don't think we've ever really talked about that. Actually, this is from episode 1. This is very similar.
Holy crap.
I went through those episodes. I thought it was fun. Samuel Farrar asks, What wears out the fastest inside an AEG gearbox? And this is kind of a follow-up question
Kind
to
of just
that.
touched on that, yeah.
I would probably say the piston would be the first thing to go, usually, most common.
I can tell you what I have broken the most.
Oh, there you go.
I have broken tappet plates the most. Because Ryan and I are in a constant search for the highest rate of fire with the least amount of weight internally. So we tend to break tappet plates.
I broke pistons
a
the
lot.
most.
Yeah.
But
Oh, and then,
nowadays,
yeah, the back teeth on pistons, yeah.
nowadays I probably wouldn't break too many pistons because of the pistons on the market these days are so much better.
Oh yeah.
So probably now, if I was building high-speed build, I'd probably break tappet plates.
SHS, Lonex, the Kratos piston.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so many good pistons nowadays.
Which I was really surprised, but also like pleasantly surprised that the Kratos piston is so good. Like we've got that thing running in a 51 a second, doesn't care.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
No,
just like,
that thing
okay,
is-
we're doing 14 volts, no problem.
Yeah, no, that piston is probably one of the most popular pistons on the market right now. I think everybody's using it for their high-speed builds.
Anything else that breaks constantly?
In a stock gun, like I said, I've had issues not crappy, but just stock, like 7mm ball bearing.
Yeah,
Bush,
yeah.
Those will just break. Bushings are probably better in that situation. It'll put more strain on the battery and the motor, but it won't break.
I don't think people check their buckings often enough. A bucking in the hop-up unit is a wear item. It's not one of those things that you drop in and it's going to be good for the life of the AEG. It's important to check it for tears, for drying out, to make sure that it's still applying the proper amount of friction on the BB to get enough hop. And so I'd say a wear item to check is that.
No, that's a good one.
Because that's not something we ever think about, right? Like
Yeah,
you build
no.
your hop-up unit and you're like, oh, this will be good forever.
I didn't even think about that. I wonder if my R hops are okay. I don't know. They still work.
Right? Because we slap them
I don't
in
play
and
Airsoft anymore.
4 years later, we're like, why is my gun shooting weird? That's why. Check your hop-up.
I think another thing that people forget is like magazine springs wear out a lot too.
Oh, true.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever replaced mine.
I just replaced a bunch of PTS ones recently.
Okay.
I didn't replace the spring. I just replaced the internals.
Yeah,
Just bought
yeah,
the
yeah.
internal rebuild kit. Very simple to install. Didn't have to mess with the springs. I tried one to to get the spring out, and it just getting it back inside was really difficult. It's just not. I was just like, this isn't worth the time I'd spend on it. I'll just buy the replacement kit. So
Yeah.
It worked out pretty well.
Okay.
But those wear out too. Those are just some things that you don't expect, as we have all of our trucks being delivered right now.
It's cheaper than buying all new magazines too, just to do a rebuild.
Especially when you buy more expensive magazines.
That's true.
Back in the day, the thing is though, back in the day, mags were pretty easy to rebuild.
Oh yeah. Well, they were also $8 a piece, so who cared about rebuilding it?
Yeah. Sorry, FedEx is making a delivery. Well, we'll probably get through maybe one more each. We'll see how long these questions go.
Okay, this one's from episode 133, Reshiram 9001. Hey, Insert, is there really any point to using the elevation and windage controls on iron sights besides zeroing purposes? I don't see any purpose for trying to adjust your sights for such elements when it would require you to compensate for your hop-up and other factors for shots that far. I feel like you'd be better off just watching your BB's path of travel and adjusting from there.
Yes.
I love how, without even considering what we were going to say in this episode, all of our questions have pointed back to something we said earlier. That's hilarious.
I think, I'm not going to say I'm an expert. I'm not going to say anything along that line of in terms of precision shooting.
Yeah.
But I do know more than probably the average person when it comes to using iron sights to adjust for elevation and wind when shooting at distance. And the thing is, the reason I would say to answer the question would be no.
Yeah.
In Airsoft is because the farthest distance of an Airsoft BB is less than your first elevation adjustment on a real AR sight for a bullet trajectory.
Yeah.
It depends on what you're zeroing at. So if you're zeroing at the Marine Corps zero, if you're doing a 25-yard zero, or I think
I stick to 36.
I don't know. There's so many zeros. I'm not going to get into that. All I know is my AR, if I shoot at 200, I don't have any elevation changes right now.
Right.
The real thing was when you're shooting with depending on your bullet, if you're shooting at 500, 600, that's when you'll be making those elevation changes. And your windage changes is because of wind.
Right.
If wind is going from left to right, then you would be making those windage adjustments based off of your distance of how you're trying to shoot.
Yeah.
You know, so if you look, actually, that's the whole concept behind like the rear adjustments on sights, was for that purpose, to be able to make those adjustments as a soldier on the fly, to be able to raise or lower your elevation depending on what you were engaging.
I didn't even know that. I thought they were there for looks. I don't know.
Well, no, it's just, you know, we grew up in an age where like red dots are now such a thing that it's like you just want to zero it at your.
I just put them on because they looked like they should be there.
Yeah, it's. I mean, like most people, if you zero at your 25 or 50 yard, you're gonna be able to hit your 100 and 200 yard steel, no problem.
Right, right.
It's just when you're taking into a factor the long travel bullet trajectory of how it starts low and goes high and then comes back down.
Right.
You know, it's just interesting. It's not something I know, like I said, a lot about, but I do know that what it was used for and how it was used. I don't really mess around with iron sights anymore. Like, why? Yeah. I mean, when you can just zero your red dot, why not? So I just don't foresee it for airsoft because of the distance to be even a thing.
Right.
That said, I mean, I guess theoretically you could find out the math of your gun if you knew it well enough to know, hey, I'm shooting at 50 yards, this is where the BB is going to be, and you can make that elevation change. And I mean, if you wanted to, or you could just raise your gun a little bit.
Yeah. Well, okay, so that's what I wanted to touch on is like, if you could zero your irons, you'd want to zero them on a day where you have like minimal wind, because BBs are so affected by wind. And then once you got that set up, my argument would be to just leave them alone, because airsoft BBs are so affected by wind. If you notice that you're shooting way off, wait a couple minutes and the wind will change and your BBs will be going the other direction. So any adjustments you do are going to be inaccurate 10 minutes from now. Yeah. So you might as well leave them alone, because Kentucky windage for BBs, right? Just watch the first shot and walk them in.
Yeah, I think because airsoft, like I said, that human eye just naturally wants to follow the BB trajectory versus following the sight. Why not just trust the BB trajectory? And the thing is you have so many factors of how long it takes to get there. Does it hit the person? Like, most people aren't just standing in the open, so it's not like shooting a target at the range. They're usually behind cover, so you don't necessarily know where that BB is, or maybe they're not calling their hit because they don't want to. I don't know.
They're behind a bush, and bushes are impervious to BB hits, so.
I remember I played one game at a place near Simi that the rule at the field was if a bush was getting shot at, you were dead.
I mean, makes sense.
But there was nothing else for cover except for bushes, so it really was a strange game.
So everyone might as well just stay out in the open.
Yes. Well, that's for a conversation for another day. All right. There's no bitterness attached to that.
I was going to say, like, oh, there's some
bitterness.
We're harboring some feelings.
Okay, this one is not from...
Not episode 1 through 4?
More AEG questions. Like, this is going to be an AEG or gun question video.
Okay, we're going to have to think of a title that people actually find interesting for us to...
Episode 81, Landry Johnson asked 4 years ago, how do I increase the range of my AEG? It gets around 100 to 150 feet, but would like to get more out of it. That's pretty good, to be honest.
Well, 100 and 150 feet lobbed, or 100, 150 feet straight shot.
Let's assume that he's able to get comfortable target hits at 100 yards, at 100 feet.
Okay.
So that is around 33 yards or so.
Okay.
Or, you know, that's pretty good.
Right.
It's not great, but that's pretty good.
Yeah.
You should, I mean, what do you think the max range is, Ryan? What do you think the max range you can get out of a 400 FPS gun?
You start to touch 300 feet. That's like pushing.
I was going to say...
About 100 yards.
I think my Mark 18 and my M27 are pretty comfortable at about 300 feet.
That's like max.
Max. Like that's just before I have to start really lobbing them.
And at that point, your BB runs out of so much velocity that, like, this is something that people don't understand. When you're shooting at somebody 200 yards or 100 yards away, or let's say 75 yards away, and they're running, you may be hitting them, but they're getting hit like they're not going to feel it, like, especially while running. They're just not going to feel it. So it's just the way it is. You know, BBs just lose so much of their velocity after that first 100 feet that it's so difficult to make that assumption that you're hitting them.
So some things you can do to improve your accuracy is...
It just says range, no accuracy.
But, okay, improving range. Okay, so the number one thing that's going to increase range is BB flight time and the longer that you can keep it aloft. And you can achieve that by increasing the amount of backspin you have on the BB, much like a golf ball or even a basketball. If you see when they throw them and they're kind of spinning backwards as they go through the air. That backspinning action generates a low pressure air zone underneath the BB, giving it more loft, like an airplane wing. So if you can generate more backspin, you can get a longer flight time. So an improved hop-up bucking can help distribute that backspin evenly. Going to a more advanced hop-up system like an R-hop or I-hop or the ER hop or
So many options.
Wizard hop, whatever is sold at your local store that generates a flat contact patch. Companies like Umbrella and Valley River Arms' good friend that we all use that does R-hops, the one they'd invented.
Hunter Seeker 5.
Hunter Seeker. So if you're
Everybody took his idea.
I know,
like,
but I'm going to give credit where it's due. Hunter Seeker is the one who really developed, fine-tuned, and also he got into like barrel lapping, which is like a whole different conversation about perfectly polishing and smoothing out the bore of the barrel, because at the end of the day, it's a musket, right? There's no rifle. So increase your flight time by upgrading your hop-up unit or your hop-up arm by putting a flat pad to give even pressure on the BB, and then because you're using a stiffer bucking system, going to a heavier weight BB is going to make it less resistant to wind changes. That weight is going to carry its kinetic energy through potential energy, I guess. It's going to carry its energy through its flight path, give you a longer flight time. That's going to result in you needing a higher FPS to be able to deliver that energy to the BB. So it's kind of a cascading effect. But start with your barrel. Or your hop-up. And then if you're looking for more accuracy at range, that's when you start looking at tighter barrels, better polishes, whatever.
Perfect answer. Perfect answer. We have a lot of AEG questions. Let's answer your last question in your helmet there, and we'll see where we're at on time.
All right.
Overall, this is really interesting that we all have, like I have a bunch of other questions that are not this related that are in here, but this is pretty funny.
Okay, this is interesting. I mean, this kind of is for everything. This one's from 144 Part 2, Lil Squanch.
Okay.
What if I have a gun that doesn't have a lot or any aftermarket parts and accessories out there for it? Should I get a more popular rifle, or should I build my gun up with what it can take?
Okay, this is a good question.
Yeah.
Because you have a Bren.
It's true.
Let's just take a note that the Bren did not make your top 10.
It did not. It did not.
It's like a love-hate relationship.
And not because I don't love that gun. I love the way the Bren looks, feeds beautifully, but the battery compartment is trash. I can't even fit an AK battery in it.
That's a very interesting thought. And I look at other guns that have such a challenge with a battery in specific situations, and I think the key thing to having a gun, like when you think about a gun that you buy for airsoft, one of the main things I think about now is I don't care about upgradability or anything. How easy is the gun to use?
Exactly.
And if the gun is so hard to use, that really deters the fun factor.
Yeah,
and
because if your experience is immediately negative,
and there are some models, very popular models that are, I'm not going to say what they are, but that are very disappointing in terms of the ergonomics of how they actually handle, not just as an airsoft gun, but even as a real gun. They don't handle very well.
And I love the Bren. I love the controls. I think it's very comfortable to shoot. I love the accessory mounting points, but it's the battery compartment that really hurts it for me, and that sucks because I love that gun.
I mean, like, I love my MP5K. Right now, I'm trying to figure out the best way to do the wiring for it. It's like right now, it's really annoying for me to have to take off the front handguard, which is a Magpul handguard now.
Oh yeah.
And it's really hard to take off to be able to plug a battery into it. Like, it's just finding options for that is not enjoyable sometimes.
And you're limited by size, right? Yeah.
So that's that's a problem I've personally experienced. There are other guns on the market that have that issue with space in terms of how you use it.
Yeah.
I think that when you design a gun for airsoft, the battery compartment aspect of it is really something that needs to be taken into account.
Yeah, yeah. To answer the specific questions about the specific question about aftermarket parts availability for a specific platform, I mean, what do we recommend? Like, say for example, if 5 years ago we both had MP5s and there weren't M-LOK accessory rails for them yet, and we were still stuck with kind of the original polymer handguard. Or take the Galil, for example. There aren't a whole lot of aftermarket accessories for them in terms of handguards, accessory mounting options, stocks, things like that. So what do we recommend to somebody? Do you keep it OG? Do you just rock it for its nostalgia and just enjoy it for that?
I mean, if you bought the gun because you really like the look of, like, so you made an example. If you bought a Galil and you just love the Galil look, I'm sure based off of the price of the Galil and the manufacturer of the most Galils, it's probably a pretty high quality product.
Yeah.
So, you know, you're spending a lot of money on the proprietary magazines that only you can use.
Yeah.
You know, and so, like, if that's what you really want to use, then go for it. You know, same with the MP5. Like, I don't think that the MP5 was necessarily, I don't think it was the modern adaptations that made me want to go back to an MP5. It was the fact that they finally started looking at rules in games to actually make an MP5 usable. That was the key thing. It has really nothing to do, in my opinion, with the attachment. I mean, yes, it is nice to be able to put an M-LOK rail on it and have a flashlight and things that you weren't able to do before. However, that said, it was mainly the fact that the rules now gave me a reason to use that for something.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely.
And props to the event organizers who started adapting those rules.
Yeah.
You know, we've been talking about One Jewel for a long time on this show, about how One Jewel makes Airsoft fun again, you know, fun sometimes, and that's a perfect example of how it's used in a way that was outside the box, and people really, you know, some people really like that. I personally love it. There's nothing like full autoing somebody indoor at One Jewel.
Oh, hell yeah.
It's so much fun. And the person can't get mad. It's One Jewel with 2 O's. Like, it doesn't hurt.
That's true.
Well, it hurts, but not like bleeding
Not
hurts.
that bad, yeah. I'd also like to make the case for, you know, that personal touch that customizing gives you. You know, I've seen a ton of guns that had a flashlight taped to the handguard, you know, or a ring clamp that was holding on some sort of accessory. And I think had it been done and just been tape or just been a pipe clamp, it wouldn't have been all that interesting to me. It would have just looked like a Mickey Mouse solution. But the ones that I've seen that I really appreciated is when the guys took the time to like paint them or to gussy them up so that they looked like it was an intentional decision. And I really think that you can get away with doing something that maybe is non-standard using household attachment options. But if you dress it up and camouflage it and paint it, now all of a sudden it looks like a service weapon that's been used, and there is certainly a cool element to that. And it allows you to use, you know, that favorite platform of yours that maybe doesn't have that many attachments available to it, but gives you a little bit more usability.
I mean, most guns, I mean, the most important things you really want out of a service AEG, if you're using it for, you know, you probably want a sling, you probably want maybe a sight, maybe a flashlight.
And all guns have sling attachment points.
Every gun for the longest amount of time have a sling attachment, so you're good there. As for the sights, you may not have some ability to put a red dot or a scope, but you don't really need that if you're using it long range anyway.
And like, look at all you know, if it's something that you can pop some holes in the top of the receiver and bolt it through to a mount, you're going to zero the optic anyway, so it doesn't really matter if it's, you know, off a little bit.
And the next thing would be a light, you know, like back in the day with AKs, before they started like they would just literally just bolt in a light into the handguard.
Yeah,
you know?
And it works.
So, and it worked.
What do you think? Do we want to do any more questions, or we want to say
I think
goodbye?
that's good. I think we have, like, what I like about this episode is it really talked a lot about upgrades and things you can do that we haven't talked. And it's surprising because none of these things we really talked about before in previous episodes. And these questions have been asked since episode 1.
Clearly, I didn't go back far enough. I've had the inserts patch on the wrong side of the helmet the entire episode. Whoops.
We'll be back next week. If you guys have a question that you would like answered on the show, please put it in the comments below. If you like this episode, please just say, I like this episode.
Yeah.
There's some, that's what really helps with YouTube is definitely hit the comments, hit the likes, hit the shares, hit the subscribe, hit the notification, hit everything that you can to make sure you know when our next insert's coming out.
We've got over 400,000 subscribers now, and we're not getting 400,000 people watching the video. So to us, that means that they're not seeing the video. So your comments, likes, and subscriptions help deliver this video to all of the people that want to see the content but aren't being notified that it's being released. So thank you guys for watching. Thanks for your participation in the videos. We can't wait to see some of your guys' questions. We hope next episode we can answer some more good ones.
Yeah. See you guys later.
Bye.